Get out of first class." The station manager snapped his fingers toward the back of the boarding area as though he were shooing away an animal. "Sir, my ticket says first class." I said, "Get out." "Are you deaf, or are you just pretending not to understand me? Please, look at my ticket." She held it out. He snatched it from her hand, looked at the boarding pass, looked at her, and laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a confused one. A loud, ugly laugh that carried across the gate. First class. "Of course, and I'm the Pope." Then he tore the boarding pass in half, slowly, gaily, deliberately. He never looked away from her eyes. "You're disgusting. Go back where you belong." The woman did not move. She did not shout. She did not beg. She only looked at him and asked one question. "Are you finished?" The man's face hardened. "Security. Get this woman out of my gate." What he did not understand was whose ticket he had just destroyed. And by the time he finally learned the answer, it was already too late to undo what everyone had seen. Earlier that day, the morning had been quiet. Colonel Adrian Vaughan, United States Air Force, retired, stood in the kitchen of her townhouse near Stone Mountain, Georgia. Coffee dripped slowly into a porcelain mug. Dark roast. No sugar. No cream. The same way she had taken it for nearly 3 decades of military service. Her home was modest and exact. Every surface was clean. Every book sat aligned on its shelf. The bed was made with corners tight enough to satisfy any inspection. Some habits remain long after the uniform is put away. Adrienne walked down the hallway with her coffee in hand. The walls told her story without needing words. A framed photograph showed her beside an F-16 on a desert runway. A commendation letter carried the signature of a 4-star general. Near the front door hung a shadow box. Colonel Eagles pinned against black velvet. A wing commander patch from Falcon Ridge Air Force Base beneath them. Nearly 3 decades of service, 14 deployments. More than 3,000 people once under her command. But that morning, none of those things were visible on her body. Adrienne wore a tailored navy blazer, simple gold earrings, comfortable flats, no uniform, no rank insignia, no military identification hanging from her neck. She looked like any professional black woman on her way to catch a flight. Her phone vibrated. A message from her daughter. "Good luck on your speech today, Mum. You're going to be amazing. Love you." Adrienne smiled. Her daughter always seemed to know exactly when to reach her. Adrienne was traveling to Washington. She had been invited to deliver the keynote address at a Department of Defense procurement summit. Inside her leather briefcase sat a printed copy of her speech, a flash drive containing restricted defense-related materials, and an official letter on Department of Defense letterhead addressed to Colonel Adrian Vaughan, United States Air Force, retired. She picked up the briefcase, locked the house, and left for the airport. Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International, was already alive with motion. Suitcase wheels rattled over tile. Announcements echoed from gate to gate. The smell of breakfast food mixed with the faint industrial scent of jet fuel. Adrienne moved through Transportation Security Administration pre-check with practiced efficiency. Shoes stayed on. Laptop remained in the bag. No unnecessary movement. No wasted time. Ahead of her, an elderly man struggled to lift a carry-on bag onto the conveyor. His arms trembled under the weight. The line slowed. Nobody stepped forward. Adrienne reached out and lifted the bag onto the belt for him. "Thank you so much, young lady." "Yes, sir." The answer came automatically. Military courtesy has a way of staying with you. Adrienne continued toward her gate. Altair Airlines. Flight 1184 to Reagan National Airport. First class. Seat 2A. Purchased with her own money. Confirmed. Assigned. Paid in full. She found a seat near the window and placed her briefcase beside her. Outside, aircraft moved slowly across the tarmac beneath pale morning light. For a few quiet minutes, everything felt peaceful. Then Adrienne noticed the man behind the gate counter. Grant Keller. regional station manager for Altair Airlines. A broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a permanent scowl and the restless energy of someone who believed authority had to be displayed constantly, or it might disappear. Grant supervised several gates in that terminal. He ran them like a private kingdom. At the podium stood a younger gate agent named Nolan Price. Every time Grant spoke, Nolan seemed to flinch. "Move faster, Nolan. I don't want delays today. Not one." "Yes, sir." "And stand up straight. You look half asleep." Grant turned away from him and scanned the boarding area. His eyes moved over the passengers. A white businessman reading a financial newspaper. A white couple with matching luggage. A white family trying to keep a restless toddler entertained. Then his eyes stopped on Adrienne. He looked away, then looked back. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped the edge of the counter. Adrienne did not notice. She was rereading her daughter's message, still smiling faintly. She had no idea that the man behind the podium had already decided something about her. The boarding announcement sounded. Altair Airlines Flight 1184 to Reagan National now boarding first class and priority passengers. Adrienne stood, smoothed the front of her blazer, picked up her briefcase. She entered the priority lane holding her boarding pass and identification. Come, unhurried, the same way she had entered briefing rooms where generals waited for her assessment. Nolan Price took the boarding pass, scanned it. The machine showed green, valid, confirmed, first class. Seat 2A. Nolan nodded. "You're all set, ma'am. Welcome aboard." Adrienne took one step toward the jetway. A hand moved in front of her. "Hold on." Grant Keller stepped between her and the entrance. He did not look at Nolan. He did not look at the screen. He looked Adrienne up and down. Slowly. "Let me see that." He took the boarding pass from Nolan, held it up, turned it over. "This says first class." Adrienne nodded. "Yes, it does." "First class?" Grant repeated it louder, loud enough for people behind her to hear. "You?" "That's correct." A smile spread across his face. Not friendly, not amused, something else. "And who paid for this ticket?" "I did." "You did?" He gave a short laugh. "With what? A stolen credit card?" The line behind Adrienne became quiet. Someone gasped. A man lowered his newspaper. Adrienne kept her voice level. "I paid with my own card. My confirmation is on my phone. I'm also an Altair Platinum member. Would you like to see the loyalty number?" She held out her phone. The booking information was clearly visible. Her name, her flight, her seat, payment, confirmation, everything. Grant did not take the phone. He barely glanced at it. "Put that away. I don't need your phone tricks." "Phone tricks." "You heard me. I've seen this before. People like you buy a refundable ticket, take screenshots, cancel it, then show up hoping nobody checks carefully. That's not what happened." "Sure." Grant turned toward Nolan. "Pull up the reservation." Nolan typed. The record appeared. Paid in full. Seat assigned. Platinum status. No fraud alerts. No warnings. No hold. Nothing unusual. Nolan cleared his throat. "Sir, the reservation is valid. Everything checks out." Grant did not turn. "Run it again." "Sir." "I already did." "Run it again." Nolan repeated the search. Same result. Green. "Confirmed." "Sir, she's clear." "Did I ask for your opinion?" Nolan went silent. His hands hovered over the keyboard. Grant turned back toward Adrienne. He leaned closer. Close enough that she could smell stale coffee on his breath. "Where did you really get this ticket?" Adrienne's jaw tightened. Her voice remained controlled. "I purchased it through the Altair application several weeks ago. I have given you government identification, a confirmed reservation, and my loyalty information. You have more than enough to verify the booking." "No, it's not enough. Not for me." So Grant looked her over again. Then he held the boarding pass between two fingers, raised it where people behind them could see, and tore it in half, slowly. The sound of ripping paper cut through the gate area. The two pieces dropped toward the floor. There. Problem solved. Adrienne looked down, then back at him. "You just destroyed a valid boarding pass. I just removed a fraudulent passenger from my gate. There's a difference. There is no fraud here. And you know it. Grant raised his voice. I know what I see. I see someone who doesn't belong in first class trying to scam her way onto my plane. I'm not allowing that. Not today. He pointed toward the terminal. Economy is back that way. Honestly, you probably can't afford that either. Maybe take a bus. That sounds more realistic for you. A murmur moved through the line. Phones appeared. Several passengers began recording. A white businessman only a few places back shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. A young couple exchanged a look, then stared down at the floor. A black woman named Talia Brooks stepped forward. She was a nurse traveling with her elderly mother. Her phone was already recording. Excuse me, you cannot treat her like that. She showed you everything you asked for. The reservation was valid. Grant turned sharply. Mind your business. This is my business. I'm standing right here watching you humiliate someone for no reason. One more word and you're off this flight too. You and your mother. I don't care. I'll clear this whole line if I have to. Talia's mother grabbed her daughter's arm. Baby, please. Not here. Talia stepped back. Her jaw trembled, but she did not stop recording. Grant pulled out his radio. Security to the gate. I have a non-compliant passenger refusing verification. Possible fraudulent ticket. She's becoming aggressive. I need her removed. Adrienne had not raised her voice once. She had not threatened anyone. She had not stepped toward Grant. She had not even pointed a finger. Aggressive. The word hung in the air. 2 airport security officers arrived. A tall man with a shaved head. A shorter woman with her hair tied tightly back. Both wore dark uniforms. Both approached with their hands near their duty belts. Ma'am, can you step aside and come with us, please? Adrienne looked at them. May I ask why I'm being detained? Grant answered before either officer could. She attempted to board with a fraudulent first-class ticket. When I confronted her, she became hostile, raised her voice, refused standard verification. I confiscated the ticket for security reasons. Every sentence was false. Everyone in the boarding line knew it, but almost nobody spoke. Adrienne turned directly toward the officers. My name is Adrienne Vaughan. I held a valid paid first-class ticket for this flight. This man took it from the gate agent and tore it in half in front of witnesses. I provided government identification, confirmation on my phone, and my Altair loyalty number. I have not raised my voice. I have not been hostile. I have not refused verification. What he just told you is false. The officers exchanged a glance. The shorter officer looked toward Grant. Grant folded his arms. She's lying. I flagged her reservation. Check it. Behind the podium, Nolan stood frozen. His face had gone pale. He knew what the reservation system showed. He knew Grant was lying. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He said nothing. The tall officer gestured toward a side corridor. Ma'am, we're asking you to come with us while we sort this out. Standard procedure. Adrienne picked up her briefcase, straightened her blazer. She did not argue. She did not beg. She did not plead. She walked between the officers with the same posture she had carried through nearly 3 decades of military service. Back straight, chin level, eyes forward. Behind her, Grant leaned against the gate counter. A faint smirk appeared. He believed he had won. The screening room was small and grey. The air smelled of cleaning chemicals and recycled ventilation. A fluorescent light buzzed overhead. There were 2 metal chairs, 1 metal table, a camera in the corner with a red light. Adrienne sat with her briefcase on the table, hands folded, back straight. The 2 officers remained near the door. Nobody explained clearly what would happen next. Adrienne asked, Am I being detained? No clear answer. Then she asked for a supervisor. Someone is coming, ma'am. Just wait. I have a right to know why I'm being held. Please wait. Minutes passed. The fluorescent tube flickered. Through the wall, Adrienne could hear muffled boarding announcements. Her flight was still at the gate. Her seat was still empty. She was locked in a room with no clear reason, no timeline, and no proper explanation. Then the door opened. Grant Keller walked in. He did not knock. He pulled out the empty chair, turned it around, sat facing Adrienne with his arms resting across the back. "So, here we are." Adrienne said nothing. "I've done this job for 9 years. I've become very good at spotting people who don't belong." He leaned forward. The ones who fake it always look the same. Too calm, like they practiced in the mirror. Adrienne met his eyes, still silent. "That's you. A fraud in a nice blazer, pretending to be something you're not." He pointed toward the briefcase. "Open it." "No, that briefcase contains materials connected to a federal defense consultation. You do not have authority to search it." Grant laughed. "Federal defense consultation?" He looked toward the officers. "You hear that? First a fake ticket, now federal defense." Neither officer laughed. Neither stopped him. Grant turned back. "Here's what happens. You open the case. I look inside. We end this little performance. Adrienne did not move. Or I escalate this to airport security, Transportation Security Administration, federal authorities. You may end up with your name in databases you don't want your name in, all because you refuse to admit you don't belong in first class." Adrienne's voice became firmer. "I am not opening that briefcase for you. Its contents are protected under federal consulting agreements. Contact Altair Corporate Security or the Transportation Security Administration Security Director if you want to escalate. I will cooperate with the properly authorized officials. I will not consent to an unauthorized search by a station manager." Grant stood. Big words for someone sitting in a security room. Then he reached across the table and grabbed the briefcase. "Don't touch that." He pulled it toward himself. His fingers worked the brass latches. One opened, then the other. Adrienne rose. "You do not have authority. Those materials include restricted defense information. Sit down." Grant raised his voice. The tall security officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, please sit." Adrienne looked at the officer. The officer looked away. Adrienne sat slowly, her fingers pressed against the metal chair. Not from fear, from restraint. Grant opened the briefcase. He dug through the contents carelessly. Papers bent beneath his hands. A printed page tore at one corner. Folders folded. He was not searching carefully. He was performing. He pulled out a document. Department of Defense Procurement Summit. He held it up. Cute. Then he found the flash drive, held it toward the light, set it down as though it meant nothing. He opened Adrienne's notes. Read fragments aloud in a mocking voice. Strategic Defense Procurement Outlook. Coalition. Interoperability Framework. He tossed the pages aside. "You spent a lot of time making this look convincing." Then he found the letter. Heavy paper. Official Department of Defense letterhead. Embossed seal. Addressed to Colonel Adrienne Vaughn, United States Air Force, retired. He read it, then laughed. "Colonel." He held the letter up. "Now she's a colonel." He looked at the security officers. "Printed this at home, probably. Nice seal. I've seen teenagers make better fake documents." "Colonel, and I'm a 5-star general." Adrienne did not blink. "That letter is authentic. Opening my briefcase and handling those materials without authorization is serious." Grant smiled. "What are you going to do? Call someone important?" He leaned close. "Nobody is coming to save you. Not here. Not ever." Adrienne held his gaze, long enough that Grant looked away first. He began pacing. "You know what I think? I think you work some forgettable office job. Maybe answer phones. Maybe move paperwork. One day you heard people talking about first class and thought, why not me?" He stopped. "So you saved up, bought yourself a nice ticket, put on a blazer, did your hair, walked in, pretending this was your big moment." He crouched beside the chair. "But people eventually go back where they came from." Adrienne's pulse beat hard in her wrists. Her fingers tightened under the table. Her face remained calm. Nearly 3 decades of military discipline had built that calm. "Are you finished?" Grant smiled. "Not even close." He picked up the official letter again, held it between 2 fingers. "You know what I should do with this? The same thing I did with your boarding pass. He made a slow, tearing motion, stopped before ripping it. He was waiting for her to react. She did not. Grant tossed it down. You're good. The posture, the voice, the stare. But it doesn't change what you are. You don't belong in first class. You don't belong in that blazer. You definitely don't belong near a colonel's rank. You belong in the back. You've always belonged in the back. Silence. The fluorescent light buzzed. The camera continued recording. Adrienne looked at him. She had faced generals, combat briefings, decisions where the wrong word could cost lives. She said nothing. Not yet. Grant walked toward the door. Hold her until the flight leaves. Board everyone else first. Then escort her out. I don't want her near my gates again. He paused. If she causes trouble, call airport police. The door shut. Adrienne sat in silence. The official letter lay crooked on the table. The flash drive rested on its side. Her keynote speech, weeks of careful work, lay crumpled inside the briefcase. Through the wall, she heard the final boarding announcement for her flight. Her seat, her plane, leaving without her. Adrienne closed her eyes, took one slow breath, released it, then waited. She had learned something over years of command. The people who use power carelessly often believe volume is strength. They rarely understand how fragile that power becomes once truth enters the room. Outside the screening room, Talia Brooks had stayed near the door. Through the narrow window, her phone recorded what it could. Grant opening the briefcase, holding up the letter, laughing, crouching beside Adrienne. The video shook, but it was clear enough. Talia posted a short clip. No dramatic caption, just raw footage. Within minutes, thousands of people had watched it. Then tens of thousands. Comments multiplied. People tagged Altair Airlines, local news stations, civil rights organizations, veterans groups. The video spread faster than anyone at the gate understood. Behind the podium, Nolan Price stared at his phone. His hands shook. He typed a message to his girlfriend. My manager just humiliated a black woman, tore up her ticket, had her detained, searched her briefcase. She had military documents, a letter addressed to a colonel. I think she's telling the truth. And I stood there. I didn't say anything. He stared at the message, then sent it. The reply came. Then say something now, before it's too late. Nolan locked the phone. His hands still trembled. Then a voice sounded from the corridor. What is happening at this gate? Colonel Everett Sloan, United States Air Force retired, was walking through the terminal. Silver hair, 63 years old, a veterans of foreign wars cap on his head. He had spent more than 3 decades in the Air Force. He understood the look of a situation before anyone explained it. Passengers stood in clusters. Phones were out. A woman near the window was crying. Security officers remained near a closed door. Everett stopped. He saw Talia. Excuse me, what happened? Talia noticed the veteran's cap, the posture, the seriousness in his face. She told him, the black woman, first class, the station manager, the torn ticket, security, the briefcase, the military letter. Everett's expression changed. What was her name? Adrienne Vaughn. The color drained from his face. Then anger rushed back into it. Where is she? Talia pointed toward the screening room. Everett moved with the kind of authority that makes people step aside. He reached the door. The shorter security officer blocked him. Sir, this is restricted. Everett turned toward her. My name is Colonel Everett Sloan, United States Air Force, retired. I served as Deputy Wing Commander under the woman you are holding in that room. Open the door, now. The officer hesitated, looked toward her partner. He nodded. The door opened. Adrienne sat where they had left her, back straight, hands folded, eyes closed. The contents of her briefcase lay scattered across the metal table. The scene looked almost like evidence from a crime. Adrienne opened her eyes. Everett. For the first time since the incident began, something shifted in her expression. Not weakness, recognition, trust. Everett stepped inside. His voice was low. His hands were shaking. What did they do? The station manager tore my boarding pass, called security, had me detained, then opened my briefcase without authorization. He said the ticket was fraudulent. It wasn't. Everett looked at the table. The crumpled Department of Defense letter, the flash drive, the bent speech pages. He picked up the letter. Read it, then placed it down gently. The way you handle something that matters. He walked out. The door remained open. Everett found Grant Keller near the gate counter. "Are you the station manager?" Grant looked up, saw the veteran's cap. His patience vanished. "Sir, this is a staff area. Passengers need to—" "I asked you a question. Are you the man who detained that woman?" "I handled a security issue. It's resolved." "Resolved?" Everett stepped closer. "Son, I served as Deputy Wing Commander at Falcon Ridge Air Force Base. The woman you just humiliated, searched, and locked in that room was Colonel Adrian Vaughn. She was my commanding officer. She ran the entire wing. More than 3,000 personnel. Aircraft. Training groups. Operations. Everything." The color left Grant's face. His mouth opened. "You called her a fraud. You tore her ticket. You opened a briefcase containing federal defense materials. And you did it because of what you decided when you looked at her." "I didn't. I was following—" "You weren't following anything." At that moment, a woman in a pilot's uniform appeared from the jetway. Captain Meredith Vale, pilot of Flight 1184. She had heard about the disturbance through the crew channel. Then she saw Adrian stepping out of the screening room. Meredith stopped. "Colonel Vaughn." Adrian looked toward her. Meredith straightened automatically, shoulders back, chin up, a posture learned years earlier when she had been a junior pilot serving under Adrian's command. "Ma'am, I served under you at Falcon Ridge. It's an honor." Then Meredith turned toward Grant. Her voice became cold. "What happened here?" Grant began stumbling over words. His hands trembled. His eyes moved from Everett to Meredith, then to the officers, then to the passengers, then to the phones recording him. Adrienne stepped forward. She did not shout. She did not need to. When she spoke, people nearby stopped talking. "My name is Colonel Adrienne Vaughn, United States Air Force, retired. I served this country for nearly 3 decades. I commanded the wing that trained pilots and personnel who served around the world. You tore my valid ticket. You had me detained without cause. You searched my briefcase without authorization. And you did all of it because of what I look like." Grant swallowed. "Colonel, if I'd known who you were—" Adrian cut him off. "That's exactly the problem. You should not need to know who I am to treat me like a human being." The gate area became silent. Grant had nothing left. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then his hand grabbed the counter. The confidence was gone. "Colonel, listen. I didn't know. If someone had told me—" "Stop talking," Everett said. "I was doing my job. Standard protocol." "There is no protocol for what you did," Adrian said. "And every time you say, 'if I had known,' you prove the point. Would this have been acceptable if I were nobody? If I were simply a woman with a valid ticket trying to board?" Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came. Captain Meredith Vale lifted her radio. "This is Captain Vale. I need airport operations at the gate immediately. Passenger rights incident. Detained retired military officer." The gate changed quickly after that. Airport police arrived. Then the airport operations director, a tall woman in a navy suit with identification clipped to her jacket. She took in the scene. The crowd, the phones, the security officers, the open screening room. Grant holding the counter. "What happened?" Everett briefed her. Short, precise. Military style. Sin months. Meredith confirmed what she knew. Talia offered her phone. The video was ready. The operations director watched the clip. Her jaw tightened with every second. Then she turned toward the staff. "Preserve all surveillance. Every camera covering this gate. The boarding lane. The screening corridor. Nothing gets overwritten." Then she faced Grant. "Mr. Keller, your airport security badge. Now." Grant touched the lanyard. His fingers struggled with the clip. He removed the badge. held it out. The operations director took it. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You are not to return to an Altair gate or any restricted area. Airport police will escort you to the employee exit. Do not speak to passengers. Do not approach staff. Do not stop until you are outside the secure area. Grant looked at the officers beside him, then at the passengers, then the phones. This is a misunderstanding. I was doing my job. Nobody answered. The officers walked him away. His footsteps echoed over the same tile Adrienne had crossed while being escorted earlier. She had walked with her head high. Grant left with his head lowered. The operations director turned toward Adrienne. Colonel Vaughan, on behalf of the airport, I am deeply sorry for what happened. There is no excuse. Altair's corporate office had already been alerted. The viral video reached executives before the operations director arrived. Adrienne was rebooked on the next first-class flight to Reagan National. Full accommodation, personal escort. No further questions. Adrienne nodded. Thank you. Before she left the gate, someone spoke behind her. Ma'am, it was Nolan Price. The gate agent stepped out from behind the podium. His face was pale. His hands still shook. I'm sorry. I should have spoken. I saw the reservation. I knew it was valid. I knew he was wrong. And I stood there. Adrienne looked at him. You saw it. You knew it. And you said nothing. Nolan lowered his eyes. If you mean your apology, put it on the record. Write a formal statement. Every detail, every word, every time the reservation system showed green and he overrode it. Because if you stay silent now, this happens again to someone who doesn't have Colonel Sloan walking past the right gate. Nolan nodded. Yes, ma'am. I will. Adrienne picked up her briefcase, straightened her blazer, and walked toward the lounge. Back straight, chin level, eyes forward. Before Adrienne's rebooked flight even reached Washington, the video had already been viewed millions of times. By the time the aircraft touched down at Reagan National, the short clip had been picked up by major national news networks, a leading Atlanta newspaper, and military publications. The same images appeared again and again. A man in an airline uniform laughing at a retired military officer. A valid boarding pass torn in half in front of a crowded gate. A briefcase opened without permission. An official Department of Defense letter held up and mocked. A black woman confined in a screening room while someone with temporary authority tried to convince her she did not belong. The footage spread across social platforms so quickly that the airline's name began trending alongside public demands for accountability. People shared their own experiences at airports. Veterans described returning home from service only to be treated with suspicion in civilian spaces. Black travelers described being questioned after white passengers had moved through the same process without difficulty. Civil rights groups responded. Veterans organizations demanded answers. Elected officials began asking what Altair had known about Grant Keller before the incident. The story was no longer only about one gate. People wanted to know whether there had been warnings, whether anyone had complained before, whether management had seen a pattern and chosen not to act. That question opened the next door. Then investigative journalist Dana Whitaker began digging. Dana had spent years reporting on transportation discrimination. She knew one viral video could expose something larger if there was a paper trail. Her team found one. Internal Altair records showed that Grant Keller had been the subject of at least 12 formal complaints during the previous 3 years. Every complaint involved a black passenger at one of his gates. 11 of the 12 described nearly the same sequence. A passenger of color was selected for additional ticket verification. The interaction escalated even after records confirmed the reservation. The passenger was spoken to publicly in a degrading or suspicious way. In several cases, the traveler was removed from the boarding area or threatened with removal. Every complaint had been filed through Altair's internal reporting system. Every complaint had been marked under review by regional management. Not one had resulted in meaningful discipline. Not one had produced a formal written response explaining what had been investigated and what had been corrected. Dana's investigative segment ran long enough to walk viewers through the pattern rather than treating it as a single, shocking clip. She showed internal correspondence with identifying details removed. The language was bureaucratic and calm. No actionable pattern identified. Consistent with standard verification procedures. Insufficient evidence of discriminatory intent. But when the complaints were placed side by side, the similarities were difficult to ignore. The report also identified the regional executive who had received repeated warnings and allowed the cases to close without serious intervention. Dana ended the segment with one question. How many times does the same pattern have to repeat before someone finally calls it what it is? That question followed Altair into every interview, every board discussion, and every public statement that came afterward. The pressure on Altair intensified. Soon after, Altair Airlines Chief Executive Officer Roland Pierce held a public press conference at company headquarters. He stood behind a podium without notes. His voice was steady. What happened to Colonel Adrienne Vaughn at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was inexcusable. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not a simple policy error. It was discrimination carried out by an Altair employee and enabled by a management structure that failed to respond to repeated warnings. He announced 5 immediate actions. First, Grant Keller was terminated. Not suspended, not reassigned, terminated. Second, the regional vice president, whose office had allowed 12 complaints to disappear into review status, was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Third, Altair would implement mandatory anti-discrimination training at every station across its network. Not a one-time seminar employees could click through once and forget. A recurring quarterly program. Completion tracked. Supervisors held accountable. Outside experts involved in review. Fourth, an independent board staffed with outside civil rights attorneys and specialists, not Altair employees protecting Altair, would audit passenger interaction complaints from the previous 5 years. The board would examine how complaints were handled, whether patterns were missed, and whether local managers had been allowed to override valid passenger records without sufficient cause. Fifth, Altair issued a direct public apology to Colonel Adrienne Vaughn. No qualifications, no excuse, no corporate hedging. Roland looked directly into the cameras. She earned her seat the same way every customer earns a seat. She paid for it. She held a valid reservation. She deserved to be treated with dignity, whether she had served this country or not. We failed her. That changes now. The corporate consequences did not end there. Federal authorities opened a formal civil rights investigation into Grant's conduct. Investigators examined whether the documented pattern of targeting black passengers amounted to systematic violations of federal protections. The inquiry did not rely only on the viral video. Investigators reviewed prior passenger complaints, internal emails, reservation records, security footage, witness statements, and the decisions made by managers who had received warnings before Adrienne ever walked into the gate area. Grant faced federal charges related to unlawful interference with a passenger and willful destruction of a valid travel document. His attorney tried to negotiate a reduced outcome. The defense argued that Grant had no prior criminal record and believed he was acting within the authority of his position. The court reviewed the video, the 12 prior complaints, the internal management correspondence, and Nolan Price's 14-page sworn statement describing every time the reservation system showed a valid green status and Grant chose to ignore it. The judge found the evidence impossible to separate from the broader pattern. Grant received 18 months of supervised probation, 300 hours of community service, specifically with veterans organizations, a $25,000 fine, and a permanent lifetime ban from employment in the aviation industry. He would never again work in an airport. He would never again hold authority over a boarding gate. The courtroom was quiet when the decision was delivered. Grant sat motionless, looking at the table. Outside, reporters asked for comment. He gave none. He entered a car and left. The career he had built around unchecked authority was gone. Meanwhile, Adrienne reached Washington. Her original keynote speech remained inside her briefcase. Bent, creased, damaged by Grant's search. She rewrote the opening. At the Department of Defense Procurement Summit, Adrienne stood before roughly 400 defense officials, military leaders, and procurement executives. Her original speech had been carefully prepared over several weeks. Now part of that draft sat bent and crumpled inside the same briefcase Grant had searched. Adrienne had rewritten the opening during the flight to Washington. She adjusted the microphone, took one breath, then told them what happened. Not the short version people saw online, the full story. The valid ticket, the green verification screen, the torn boarding pass, the word aggressive, the security room, the unauthorized search, the official letter being mocked, her flight leaving without her. She spoke about serving nearly 3 decades in uniform and still being told she did not belong in first class. She spoke about how difficult it is to remain calm when every instinct tells you to fight back. She spoke about black service members who return from deployments and still encounter barriers at airport gates, traffic stops, offices, and other places where their service record is invisible. When she finished, the room rose. Roughly 400 people stood. The applause continued for a long, sustained minute. Adrienne remained at the podium, chin up, eyes steady, the same posture she had held in the screening room. But this time, the room stood with her. The speech spread widely on its own, separate from the airport video. Passages were quoted in opinion columns, referenced in congressional discussion, played across national media for days. Within the following weeks, several major airlines announced internal reviews of passenger interaction protocols. A congressional subcommittee cited Adrienne's case during a formal hearing on racial discrimination in commercial aviation. Her story had moved from one boarding gate into a larger national conversation about how discretion, authority, and bias intersect when travelers have little immediate power to challenge a decision. The system did not transform overnight. Systems rarely do. But something cracked. And through that crack, people began asking questions that should have been asked much earlier. Adrienne returned to her consulting work. She continued traveling, still carrying the same leather briefcase, still flying first class when she chose to, still walking through airports with her head high. But returning to normal was not enough for her. Months after the incident, Adrienne created the Vaughan Foundation, a non-profit organization focused on supporting black veterans transitioning from military life into civilian life. Career placement, legal advocacy, mental health resources, job training, housing support, practical help for people who had served their country and returned to a society that did not always recognize what they carried. The foundation opened with a single office in Atlanta. Within a year, it had expanded into 4 cities. Adrienne funded the early work with her own savings, her consulting income, and donations that arrived after her keynote became widely known. The programs were practical by design. Resume and career transition support for veterans whose military experience did not translate neatly onto civilian job applications. Legal advocacy for people struggling with employment or housing barriers. Mental health resources for veterans and families. Job training. Housing support. Connections to employers willing to understand military skills instead of forcing veterans to start over as though their service meant nothing. Adrienne wanted the foundation to solve real problems, not simply produce inspirational brochures. She did not ask people to feel sorry for her. She built something. Altair Airlines later invited Adrienne to serve on the independent oversight board created after the scandal. She accepted on one condition. The board would have real authority, not symbolic advisory power. Real ability to investigate complaints, require policy changes, demand answers from leadership. Altair agreed. Adrian had no interest in revenge. She wanted the next woman standing in a boarding line to have a system that worked before chance sent a retired colonel or sympathetic pilot walking past. She wanted the person without famous connections to be protected too. Grant Keller completed all 300 hours of community service. He spent them working through veterans organizations and a veterans medical facility in rural Georgia, sorting supplies, cleaning waiting rooms, helping with ordinary tasks beside the same kind of service members he had once mocked through Adrian's identity. Whether he truly changed is impossible to know. He gave no interviews. He offered no meaningful public explanation. He eventually left aviation completely and took work far from airports and passenger service. The man who once controlled a dozen gates at one of the busiest airports in the world became anonymous again. The aviation industry continued without him. No gate stopped operating because he was gone. No aircraft failed to depart. The authority he once treated as personal power had never truly belonged to him in the first place. Nolan Price submitted a 14-page sworn statement the day after the incident. Every word he could remember Grant saying. Every command. Every time the reservation system showed Adrian as valid. Every time the screen displayed green and Grant replaced the objective result with his own suspicion. Nolan admitted where he had failed too. He wrote that he knew the ticket was valid. He wrote that he understood the situation was wrong. He wrote that fear of his manager kept him silent when he should have spoken. The statement became critical evidence in the federal case. It also became a turning point in Nolan's life. Months later, after transferring to another terminal and eventually earning a supervisory role, he created a peer accountability process that allowed any gate agent to flag a colleague or supervisor's questionable behavior without retaliation. He called it the green light protocol because, in his words, a green light should mean go for everyone. A manager should not be able to turn a valid green result into a red stop simply because prejudice feels like instinct. Talia Brooks was later recognized by 3 civil rights organizations for her courage as a witness. She did not think of herself as brave. She described herself as a nurse traveling with her elderly mother who happened to have a phone in her hand. But she had done something important. She recorded. She stayed. She gave her name. She refused to look away. Later, Talia began volunteering with a passenger rights advocacy group. Whenever people praised her, she gave the same answer. Your phone can be a witness. Use it responsibly. The lesson of Adrian Vaughan's story is not that someone important was treated badly. That would be too small. The real lesson is that no one should have to reveal a military rank, corporate title, wealth, fame, or connection before receiving basic human respect. Adrian deserved dignity before Grant knew she was a colonel. She deserved it before Captain Meredith Vale recognized her. She deserved it before Everett Sloan walked past the gate. She deserved it if she had never served in uniform. She deserved it if she worked in a grocery store, if she cleaned offices, if she was unemployed, if she was traveling for the first time in her life. A valid ticket should have been enough. Her humanity should have been enough. There is another lesson in what happened around her. Many people saw something wrong. Some recorded. Most stayed quiet. Nolan knew the reservation was valid and said nothing. The security officers heard Adrian's calm explanation and still allowed Grant to control the story. Passengers watched. Some looked away. Talia chose differently. Everett chose differently. Meredith chose differently. Later, Nolan chose honesty. One person's courage did not fix everything, but courage moved from person to person. That is often how accountability begins, not with everyone becoming brave at once, with one person refusing to look away, then another, then another. Authority without accountability becomes dangerous very quickly. A uniform a badge, a gate podium, a management title. None of those things make someone's judgment automatically fair. Power requires discipline, restraint, humility, the willingness to verify before accusing, the willingness to listen before deciding, the willingness to admit when your first assumption may be wrong. Grant's mistake was not only that he failed to recognize Adrienne, his deeper failure was believing recognition should have mattered. When he said, "If I had known who you were," he revealed the entire problem. Respect that appears only after status is revealed is not respect. It's calculation, and real dignity should never depend on calculation. The people above Grant also carried responsibility. Complaints had already been filed, patterns existed, management had warnings. Those warnings were softened, filed away, ignored. A company can fail someone long before the final public incident. It can fail them every time a complaint disappears, every time a pattern is called coincidence, every time someone says there is not enough evidence because nobody bothered to collect it. That is why institutions need more than good intentions. They need systems that notice, independent reporting, real review, clear consequences, leaders willing to hear uncomfortable truths before a viral video forces them to. Forgiveness does not mean consequences disappear. Accountability does not have to become cruelty. Adrienne did not demand public humiliation for Grant. She did not chase him through the airport. She did not make revenge the center of her life. She told the truth, allowed the evidence to stand, then used what happened to build something larger than the moment. A foundation, an oversight role, a voice for veterans, a chance to improve the system for people who might never be recognized by anyone powerful. That is a deeper kind of strength, not simply proving someone wrong, making the next person's path safer. Justice does not always arrive quickly. Sometimes it arrives because a phone camera keeps recording. Sometimes because a junior employee finally writes the statement he should have given earlier. Sometimes because an old colleague happens to walk past the right gate. Sometimes because a pilot recognizes a former commander. Sometimes because an investigator opens a file and notices the same story has happened 12 times. The question is not whether chance will always send help. It won't. The better question is what we can build so justice does not depend on chance. That is where responsibility lives. If you see someone being treated unfairly, you may not control the outcome. But you can become part of the record. You can document. You can speak. You can verify. You can ask why. You can refuse to laugh. You can refuse to help turn someone into a problem before anyone has checked the facts. And if you hold authority, remember that every small decision teaches people what kind of system they are standing inside. One torn ticket can reveal a culture. One ignored complaint can protect a pattern. One brave witness can preserve the truth. One honest apology can begin change. One person with power can choose revenge. Or they can choose reform. Adrienne chose reform. That choice did not erase what happened. It gave the pain somewhere useful to go. And perhaps that is the most hopeful lesson here. We cannot always control whether someone judges us unfairly. We cannot always control whether a room recognizes who we are. But when truth finally has room to speak, we can decide what comes next. We can use power to humiliate or to repair. We can use anger to destroy or resolve to build. We can look away because speaking feels uncomfortable, or we can become the witness someone else needs. You should never have to prove your worth just to be treated like a person. Respect is not a reward for status. It is the minimum. And power without decency is never strength. It is only power waiting to be exposed.